I've started just kind of like reaching out to people in general, but specifically like I've reached out to someone who has a video production company and was looking for freelancers, and he I think is going to have some work for me. And I reached out to someone who, or like got introduced to someone who is a video editor for some like bigger YouTubers, and he like potentially will have some work for me to do. And I've talked to a few like small businesses or like friend of a friend who has like a side hustle that might want like an animated video to explain what the side hustle does, kind of thing. So basically the problem that I want to like make progress on right now is thinking about how to get more freelance video editing and motion design clients.
I have many thoughts and solutions for you. So I right now actually do professional video production for a nonprofit.
So Gabe, actually, yeah. I apologize to cut you off. However, I think that in principle, what we want to do is start with asking questions to just like further clarify what Sophie's, what Sophie's already done. And then we have ample time every single time to go into brainstorming and ideation. But my first question is like, Sophie, when you say you want to be a YouTuber and you're reaching out to video production companies, what's the ultimate question again? You might have said it at the very end.
Yeah, ultimate question is I want to get more freelance. My kind of like plan right now, so which like might change, is I want to get enough freelance video clients to have that be like a sustainable business where I can like live off of that and keep working and growing my YouTube channel like in the process. And I think that having freelance video clients would be a good way to like learn about video from another angle and like learn about business from another angle.
So how do I get enough freelance video clients to sustain myself financially and become a successful YouTuber, basically?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
So one clarify, just to clarify, it's that the long-term goal is to be just a YouTuber, but you're like looking for the midterm goal to support yourself to do the freelancing. So you're wondering how to get more clients. I'm curious, by the way, what have you done so far to try to get freelance opportunities?
Basically just I've approached, like, I went to my town's local business networking international meeting, and so I talked to like a dozen small business owners there and like introduced myself and said like this is what I do, and like sent them a follow-up afterward and said like with like a video that I've done, and then I've like gotten someone from that who is like a home builder who might be interested in having a video made like for his website, or like improving the video that he already has on his website. And then other than that, it's just been people who I've like reached out to for advice or for another reason, or like gotten introduced to from someone else, and then I say like I'm a freelance video editor, motion designer, and then they like, one of them has like come to me and said I want something to like, I have a specific 30-second animation that I want made that'll like explain what for him it's like he has a scam identification software, and he's like I want a 30-second animation that'll explain what the scam identification software does.
What does that outreach look like? Like, are you actually pitching, or are you just saying, hey, I do video stuff?
Hey, I do video stuff.
Yeah.
What has been your I guess you could say conversion rate so far? Like how many people that you've kind of talked to about it have purchased or are like seriously interested? I'd be keen to understand specifically how many people have actually become customers.
Conversion rate right now would be 0. I mean, I started doing this like started looking into doing this about a month ago, so I like haven't had any freelance clients yet.
Have you been documenting and tracking the method of pitching, by the way, like the method of outreach? Because sometimes like this will be likely, as you kind of continue this journey, you'll be able to identify since you probably have several skills, you maybe want to hone in on what is most wanted in the market. So you can find out like, hey, what did I do? What steps did I take that resulted in a successful close? Have you been tracking that?
What would that look like?
Nick, do you want to help me out with some examples here on this with the sales funnel?
Yeah, so I think that we have a pretty clear picture of sort of like where you're at, Sopy, and you're doing perfect in the hot seat so far. So I just wanted to express that to you as well. And yeah, we can get into a little bit of brainstorming now. So one thing that I'm hearing is really a goal before how do I create like financial abundance or sustain myself in the short term is like, how do I land my first client? And one thing that I think would be very useful for you would be to shift into a little bit of awareness of like, oh, I need to do sales. Like I need to actually sell my service to people intentionally. And so what that would look like is essentially narrowing in what is my pitch? What is my value proposition? And getting very clear for yourself, how can I actually serve and create good outcomes for people in their business? It sounds like the way that you do that is through video. But then you want to get more clear on like, well, what kind of video specifically do you do? What specific strengths and what specific niches are you looking to and intending to target? And we could spend some time here on this call coming up with some messaging for that. But it would be important to shift away from this kind of passive, hey, I like to do video, to like a very specific, hey, I've identified a problem that your business has, or I see an opportunity to improve something on your website. Here's what I have in mind that would solve that problem for you, and here's what it would cost, kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the value that I can provide is adding the thing that I want to target is the personal story of the personal story of the business and how instead of just looking at a website, or I guess the website, making the website feel more like the person who's looking at the website for like the potential client that I would be working for this website. Making it more, having that personal.
Can I share some language that might resonate a little bit? Is it something like, I create videos that share the personal story of the business so that your customers feel more connected to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Targeting, like being able to show showcase what the businesses are.
Yeah, I think just a comment there, like that's obviously I think very good, by the way. There's a lot of market for like these really smaller video projects or animation projects for small businesses and local professionals. So I think that definitely want to just comment on that that's a good area. I think that we can workshop it here, but definitely work on, like Nick said, some of the verbiage here, right? Because it needs to be succinct, right? It needs to be to them like, why would they buy from you, right? It's going to have to be, okay, so most businesses have a great service that they offer and have a great story, and especially on a local level, right? You're requiring to make sure you connect with your people, right? Most of the businesses are you in a small town area, or is it like a pretty large city?
Yeah, I'm in thank you. I'm in Corning, New York. So I'm in the Finger Lakes area of upstate New York, and my town is 12,000 people.
Okay, perfect. So the point is, like, there's going to be some competition there, and you can basically pitch them on that. You can tell their story in a way that will resonate with potential clients, right? Mm-hmm. The thing that you're going to have to work on and keep like refining, and obviously we can go over some of this here, is being really good at telling that yourself. Because if you're a storyteller, you need to be able to tell it in your own story too. Like, how are you going to help them? And if you can come across as a convincing storyteller for your own story, they're going to have probably a pretty high chance of ending up to purchase from you to tell their story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I've done exactly what you're trying to accomplish, and I have like the concrete, when you're reaching out to clients, one of the best things you can do is already have some work done to show them. Like if you have an idea for a video you want to make for them, make the first 10 seconds of it and then send them the email with that. Like, hey, I noticed you have this problem I want to solve for you. Here's a video that might work. Let's chat. If you want more, let me know. And in that first email, you don't even need to do pricing or anything. You want it to be as like simple, as direct as possible. Maybe your goal is to get them on a phone so you can talk about pricing and things like that. But if you can do a little bit of work beforehand, that's one of the strongest things you can do.
Okay, yeah.
Does anybody else have any comments in here?
I was just gonna say exactly what Gabriel said, so just I second that. Like that whole show don't tell thing. So
I third it.
I checked out your YouTube, Sophie, and it's actually really good. Like I like a lot of your editing.
Thank you.
You have a lot of talent.
Thank you.
Oh damn, this is legit.
Sophie sent me a screenshot of one of her Premiere Pro projects, and so I could see what the editing looks like. And it is there's so much going on. There's just so much.
It seems that you have all the value. You just need to learn how to package it, which is perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's way better to have that problem than the reverse.
Yeah, it's true.
I also want to say, like, you have a very particular editing style, and like you make this really awesome art. And I will say, when it comes to like getting clients, don't there's kind of two directions you can go. You can either just be a general video person who's like, you have this skill set, but you're willing to adjust to what they need, or you can be someone who just specifically does this really like high energy, quick editing. Either is fine, but you should be honest with yourself about what you would enjoy doing and like what value you think you'd make for the specific clients. Because there's some clients that do not want this. They want something a lot cleaner and more simple. But there's some clients who would love to have this. And so it's worth thinking through that as you're figuring out who you want to work with.
Okay, yeah.
Do you have clarity on like what?
Oh,
Oh, no, you finish your thought and then I have a question for you.
I was just going to ask, do you have a recommendation of which you think I maybe should aim for, or do you think it's just like, or are you more saying like it should be up to me of like,
yeah, you'll figure it out. It's hard to say because one of the main career advice I give to people is just what is more fun to you. You should just do that. But sometimes in the moment you can trade off a little bit of fun just to get your foot in the door, and then you can have more fun later.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I had a question, which is basically like, do you have clarity on like what you want to offer to people? Like if someone said, I'm interested in a video, I would love a 1-minute video on the front page of my website. Is that actually is that what you want to do? And then B, do you have clarity on what you would charge for something like that?
So A, is that what I would want to do? Yes. And B, I think it would depend on what would go into making that video in terms of price. Like, but if it was just like a basic sort of like explainer video where it said like, this is the business, this is how it works, sort of like explaining some kind of process of the business that would be like important for the customers to hear about, like something like that, I think I would charge $700 right now. And then like, especially because it's like I'm just getting my foot in the door.
And so would one goal for you potentially be something like, I want to do 5 or 6 of those projects per month?
Yeah. Something like that.
Cool.
Have you thought about identifying the ideal client so you can target your outreach more precisely?
Not too much yet. I think being a video editor for YouTubers is probably what my ideal client would be, but I'm also thinking I want to do a few projects for like small businesses or like other types of people, just to like learn from that experience and like kind of see what their process is of like how they think through different things in a way that like I guess like that I think making a video for them would help me do. But yeah, my ideal client would be video editing for YouTubers.
Trying to think about this strategically, because if you, and that would probably involve longer form projects, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like 10 minutes about, I think.
Nick, what do you think about this idea? I just want to toss this out again. I'm not making this as a recommendation, just kind of brainstorming here. If the long-term goal is to do longer-term video editing, do you think that there's maybe a better way to approach initial, like the client base might be harder, but longer, like 5 to 10 minute videos with like more in-depth histories about the businesses? Maybe you're in the door as like a 1 minute intro, and then you sell them eventually if they like your work on a longer term, like a long, maybe it's 5 minutes or something like that, 3 minute video that talks about kind of maybe the specifics of the history of the business. Because I'm just trying to think about, if your long-term goal is to get to that area, you want to like plot out the steps, roughly speaking, to build the skill sets along the way. Because 1 minute videos are very different than 20-minute videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like tossing out some ideas here if somebody wants to chew on that.
I hear that, and that makes sense to me. Maybe a slightly different way to think of it is, so if you're at such an early stage that you don't yet know like what sticks and what works, and you don't have a large enough sample size, obviously with zero paid customers yet, which will change in the very, very near future, I'm sure, to know like what actually puts money on the table. But my first thought would be to spend 80% of your time just doing the projects that put money on the table immediately, and then spend 20% of your time just shooting for your ultimate ideal outcome, which is to do video work for other YouTubers. So I would also be in like, 80% of my time I'm sending out these pitches, I'm doing video work for these paid clients, etc. I'm doing sales. But then 20% of the time I'm like trying to do networking with other YouTubers, putting myself in the same room as other YouTubers who would have the potential budget to be able to hire you on as a part-time assistant or aide, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of like my take on it, is to always be like, you have your North Star. I want to help other YouTubers grow their channels or whatever and do video work for them. If that truly is your North Star, be spending time on it.
Yeah, I guess I also haven't done, like, my outreach in general has been, I've done so little outreach in both like approaching local businesses for explainer videos and in approaching YouTubers to be editors for them, that like I'm not I guess I'm not sure if I guess I just don't know if I don't know how hard it would be to get a video, like to edit, to get a paid paid gig editing a video for a YouTuber versus get a paid gig editing or making a video for a small business, because I like have done so little, or I've done like, because of the amount I've done in terms of like reaching out to them.
I think Nick's point is actually really good. Like, if you haven't, it's not like you've exhausted some channels, right? And you're trying to go do a certain level of outreach on the ideal lifestyle type of side. I would really recommend kind of like compiling a list of 50 to 100 like channels, or like at least maybe identify the persona, right? Of what exactly, like what size of a YouTube channel would you want? Because again, you got to think about like, can they pay you? Maybe you want to do some example videos like on the side to build your portfolio. But I think that's actually would be kind of what I recommend. If you're able to do that, if you have the kind of financial capacity to float the boat, pay the bills now, to really gun down, very focused for a month to 3 months, possibly longer, maybe 6 months, just really trying to like bring in your ideal kind of role, which would be what you said. And if that doesn't work, then you kind of like plan on another route. But one of my mentors told me, he pointed out to me, because I plan a lot of things, sometimes to a fault. He's like, listen, I understand your plan is great, but don't focus on the plan. focus on getting from where you want to go, or from where you are now to where you want to go. Don't like create extra steps if necessary. So try to go on the most direct route if you can. And I would second kind of Nick's thoughts on that.
All right, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I've like already gotten a lot of clarity today about like, I guess just like getting more specific about what I want out of making videos for other people, and like thinking about like making a list of the, like your advice to make the 50 to 100 channels list is like, I feel like really helpful for me to like just getting clearer.
Yeah, because for all you know, you do some outreach and it like turns out that it's relatively easy and they're all looking for editors. Like you don't know, right?
Yeah.
You don't have the data right now to know, okay, can I get a job straight away into that? You don't have the data to know what exactly do business owners want for intro videos, right? So it's going to be a matter of like, I would recommend along with your outreach, be tracking like when you reached out to them, what method you reached out to them on. Did you send them an example pitch? How did you pitch them? Were you more passive in the ask, or were you direct in the ask? And then document why did they say no if they said no? Because then you'll be able to start to correlate themes and reasons for it all, right? And that will inform your strategy going forward.
Do you have any recommendations for like how to track that kind of stuff? Like Google
spreadsheet?
Doc?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just put it in a Google spreadsheet. That's what
Okay.
I run my life off of Google spreadsheets.
Okay.
A suggestion for your immediate, meeting your financial needs, outreach wise, you said you had gone to like a local business meeting. You might like find, I don't know, 3 or 4 businesses that you would like to make a video for and make a video for them, and, offer it to them see if they're interested. But because if you make those connections in your local like chamber of commerce or whatever, those people talk a lot. And so if you can get a few of them to be like, oh yeah, Sopy is amazing at video editor, she made this video for me and blah blah blah, they will talk and you'll get recommendations that way. And that's just for your immediate. I know that's not your long-term goal, but you do need money coming in. So take a month, make a few free videos and see if you can make connections that way for your immediate financial needs.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's honestly, especially in a small town, that's super powerful. The town I'm in now that I used to work in, it's like 30,000 people or something like that. And being part of the chamber events and going to all the chamber of commerce events, like in about a year's time, I knew all the major people who could introduce me to anybody I needed to. So like, especially in a smaller town like that, that's super powerful.
Yeah, I live in a city of 1.5 million people, and still the people in the Chamber of Commerce know all the people. All the people you need to know are there.
I'm signed up to go to my town's Chamber of Commerce meeting, like its next meeting in like a week.
Nice.
Solid.
You might, so when you do that, just talk to some people, tell them what you do, and see if you can offer them a free video in exchange for testimonials and, referrals.
One thing, I have a quick note that I learned from when you go to networking events, sometimes it's a little bit, intimidating if you don't know anybody. Like I used to go to these things at the beginning, I knew no one, but somebody offered me a piece of advice, which was set a target of however many people you want to speak with and meet at each event, right? So like, I'm going to this networking event, there's gonna be 100 people there. My goal is not to meet all of them. My goal is to meet 5 of them and make a good connection with 5 of them, right? So I would set that as a small goal, a mini goal in your mind when you go to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
So Sopy, what are you hearing from all of this? What are some of your takeaways?
Major takeaway was Silas's advice of the 50 to 100 channels, and just, I think my biggest takeaway is figuring out what my ideal client is and then going after that. And I think since like I'm just even like getting my head into like thinking about doing this at all, I guess I hadn't really, it was kind of like a little bit more of like people approaching me and saying like, can you, like originally how I even thought of doing this was someone approached me, it was like, I sort of like asked someone for advice and they were like, oh, like, can I like hire you to do After Effects work? And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess you can. So it was kind of just like, my main takeaway from this is like figuring out the ideal client that I want.
And are you posting? Sorry.
What's that?
So we're actually going to wrap
online on social media.
She has a YouTube channel. We're going to wrap on that note just to keep time and make sure that we have ample time to go through several other hot seats. But Sophie, that was super fun. I'm glad you got a lot out of it.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, totally. So who wants to step up next into the hot seat?
I'll pitch mine, I guess.
Perfect. Go for it.
So, Silas and I are rebooting one of his older podcasts, Delivered Sooner, and he's having me take a lot of point with it. And it's, I've wanted to do a podcast for a while. I feel like I have like good value to add to it, but like this is all very, very new. And I guess my question is like, how do I go about structuring it and like getting the sponsors, and I guess what's the best way to go about it? And I know that Jamie, I know that you have had some experience with podcasts, and well, I guess I'm here to workshop.
So this is a podcast that already existed, but now you're rebooting it. And the question is, what's the best way to go about rebooting the podcast? Just in general?
Yeah, kind of. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Silas, but you guys like took a step back for a while on the Delivered Zoomer, and now I guess we're just trying to, kind of give it a fresh face. And I'm going to be doing it with them now, and I guess what's like the best way to do like a new release, kind of like give it a new feel and start like gathering the sponsorship and everything.
So there's a couple other pieces of context. Is just generally like I did this project originally as something I thought would be helpful for myself, but also as like a test project for my big podcast that I'm running now. And since it's been sitting idle for a year, and I think there's a great market for conversations or just content in general for Generation Z entrepreneurs and professionals, I thought Katja, since she always wanted to have a podcast, would be really great to do this. So I just pick it up, we'll rebrand it and go forward, but turn it into an income stream, because we'll both be doing this, turn it into an income stream over the coming year. So there's like 12 episodes out so far. We'll obviously redo artwork and stuff like that, but just I think our general questions are around, what do you guys think is some of the best practices you've seen in podcasting? Especially kind of curious to understand the approach that y'all take or would take for sponsorships and getting that lined up.
I have a question. What exactly is the podcast? Like you said, it was a little bit entrepreneurial, but like what exactly is it?
So I think right now what we wanted to do is we want to mainly focus on, like younger entrepreneurs. So portion of it will be like interviewing business owners, like young owners of startups and people around our age, I guess. And then also we were kind of workshopping the idea of possibly having kind of more of advice style to, younger people who are just getting into business, kind of like me, as, I'm 18 and I'm, just getting started, and I do run into like questions on a daily basis. And I think that it would be fun to workshop them with Silas, who's a little bit older, and kind of like give my point of view and Silas's point of view, and to really target a younger audience.
So one thing that I'm kind of struggling is figuring out like what is the ultimate question. What I heard is like, how do we do the podcast and how do we get sponsors? And those to me seem to be separate questions. So either Katja or
I guess like the solid question is like, what are the best practices that you guys have witnessed as far as podcasts go? Like what is your draw when you are looking for a new podcast, and like what are I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, Silas, like those are going to be our main questions.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, the biggest thing is what do you guys notice as best practice? Let's start with this. Best practices, like for podcasts, what are some of the reasons you guys choose podcasts? In your opinion, like what makes a good podcast? Just some of the things, because we're creating a content schedule and would be keen to get some feedback on the market. And then we can go into sponsorship questions secondly.
Cool.
How long are you wanting each podcast episode to be, kind of in general, like 30 minutes, an hour?
I'm guessing, you know, obviously this is between Katja and I kind of working on this, but we're thinking probably like under 30 minutes.
Okay.
Unless it's an interview, maybe it'll be longer.
Yeah. That's pretty fair length.
Well,
How long are, for all of you guys who listen to podcasts, how long are they typically? And what's the topic? Like, is it like more finance or personal stuff?
I listen to a lot of podcasts and I listen to only interviews, basically. And they're normally an hour to an hour and a half. I listen to Armchair Expert a lot. And so basically just like personal story of the person who's being interviewed. A lot of it is like someone who had a big career in sports, founder of a company, like famous actor, something like that. Someone who's like written a memoir, is going on a book tour, and is doing an hour-long interview with someone.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Sopy. What do you like? Do you just like sit down and listen to a podcast? Because like personally for me, like I'm kind of like don't even touch the podcast if it's over like 50 minutes, just because I just don't find that I have the time to like sit down and listen to something that's like over an hour long. Oftentimes I'll be like, I don't know, cleaning my house or something like that if I do listen to a longer one. But I guess that's sort of my question. Like, what do you find yourself doing when you listen to podcasts?
For sure. I never just sit down and I'm doing nothing else other than listening to the podcast. Another one I listen to, I forgot to mention, musicians is probably interviews of musicians is probably one of my like number one things I listen to. I listen to Zane Lowe a lot. And I'm never just like sitting there just listening. What I like about podcasts is that I can be taking the information while I'm doing something else. So it kind of is like, if I was just listening to the podcast, it'd be too boring. If I was just like driving, it would be too boring. So driving, cooking, cleaning, running. I listen to podcasts when I run.
Okay, so like longer podcasts don't like make you like, doesn't seem like daunting to you. I guess I'm like kind of like trying to figure out what the average listener look at a longer podcast like.
Are the people in this call the kind of people that you want to be listening to the podcast? Like Zoomers, like young people? Is that intentionally the audience that you're trying to attract?
I would say to some degree, because you know everybody in this call is, you know, trying to become an entrepreneur of some sort, and I guess we're just kind of, you know, we want to do the interview style, and Sopy said that she would listen to the interview styles and then kind of just like, you know, point of view from like fellow entrepreneurs and like the problems that we've gone through and how we solve those problems.
Do you have a specific age range?
Silas?
I mean, I think the title, the deliberate Zoomer, kind of gives it away. We're ideally targeting people like 24 or younger, right? And I think that like my main idea here was that like with Katja being literally entering her career this year, like her first year into like the real career space, I have been helping mentor her through a lot of her questions with her boss and stuff. And I think it's just an interesting opportunity to showcase live, essentially, not live, but like as she goes through her career, the big career questions she has, because likely many other people have those questions, right? So that's why we were thinking about doing some interviews with people who have like done well, but also kind of just like taking a topic, right? Approaching your boss about a raise, or asking about like some of the things that Katja's asked to do, like she's going to be on call for a couple weekends and that's not in her contract, or like different like like small problems like that, and breaking them down to like little episodes with topics and how to approach it. Those are kind of the things we're thinking about. But what I think we're really looking to find out is, like, when you guys choose to listen to a podcast, are there things that really, I don't know, I guess, are there things that like will turn you off of a podcast, or reasons that you're specifically drawn to one or the other? Are there interesting things you've seen for the monetization that podcasts do differently than others?
So
oh, sorry.
I have a couple thoughts here. It sounds like you guys are trying to get clarity on like what kind of content that you want to deliver, and trying to set up best practices early, so that you have like something like, so that you can get a higher trajectory growth rate or deliver more value to your target audience or something like that. And I think we can spend some time talking about just like in principle what good practices are. Like, you want to ship content consistently, you want to have your format and stick to it, and not like be random and like surprising people. You probably want to have, you know, a couple of guest interviews with people who have some audience that you can cross-pollinate, that you can use that kind of thing to, you know, shortcut the growth of people's awareness of what it is that you're doing. And you want to have some kind of clarity on how to market the podcast outside of just producing the content, right? So that's one whole conversation. There's a ton of stuff that people can chime in ideas there, but then it sounds like there's also this other part that you're kind of curious about for the people here, which is like you're seeking to do some form of market research. You know, what do you guys like in podcasts, and what makes you want to consume a podcast? So am I piecing that together correctly? It's kind of like two parts.
I think that's pretty accurate.
Okay. So let's, for the sake of time, think about what market research you want to conduct, and we'll set aside 5 or 10 minutes for that, whatever you feel like would serve you best, 5 or 10 minutes for that. And then it would be interesting to hear from other folks, like best practices or interesting things that you've seen other podcasts do that were attractive and high value for you. So then, Katja, what sort of questions do you have for the people here if you want to spend some time doing some market research with your target audience?
I guess, like, I would say, let's just like make it really broad, and like, you guys are scrolling through Spotify or wherever you're going to find your podcast. Like, what is the main grab that you see? Like, what is like 2 things that will grab you about the podcast and you're like, I want to listen to this? Is it like the artwork originally?
Let's not lead the thought. Let's see what they have.
Okay.
Cool. Nice. Name and artwork. That's like the first thing. Does this look relevant to my interests?
For me, it's name and description.
Yeah, name and description.
So I'll say I never really like go through a catalog for podcasts. I normally find them when I'm looking for information on a specific topic. So they're normally through referrals, recommendations, blog posts, or other people who recommend them.
Looks like Gabe agrees with that. Yeah, I search for like specific problems or specific topics as well. So if I search like entrepreneur, you might come up, but I don't think I would ever search Zoom, even if I was 5 years younger, like Zoomer, right?
Yeah.
So the description would have to be optimized for that.
What do most of the podcasts, how are most of the podcasts y'all listen to titled? Like, what's the kind of way that they title them?
Well, for me, I listen to, dozens of different podcasts that I like go on and off. A lot of them are like, there's a lot of variety. Most of them don't really have spontaneous names. Like there's one just called The Growth Machine that I listen to as far as like SEO and marketing. And that's just literally the company's name. So, and I find that a lot of the ones I find is like just the company's name, the person's name, something like that.
For the title of the episode, like the first company name, episode.
Oh, I meant for the title of the podcast altogether. The names are normally like interview and then the person they're interviewing or the overarching topic they're talking about. So if it's a conversation about SEO optimization and a project, it'll just be that.
Anybody else? I would like to hear kind of the differences, different views there.
So for me, I would say that it's pretty much the exact same thing, but the way that I go about podcasting is what am I thinking about right now and what kind of problems do I need to solve right now? And then as I'm doing something else, how can I maximize my time? So if I'm, in the car or whatever, I feel like a good use of my time is thinking and trying to solve the problems that I have in my brain. So if none of the podcasts that I currently listen to solve any of those problems, like I can't find something relevant, then I'll go and try and find a new one.
How many of the shows you guys listen to have detailed show notes with like references and stuff?
I just find that I vastly prefer it when there's timestamps.
I don't look at the show notes.
I don't usually, but I have been, and they're pretty.
I've never looked at show notes. I always want to go back, but I never do. But I've noticed a lot of podcasters with them. Okay. Katja, do you feel like that's enough research for now? We can go on to more of the other topic.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I actually think I have one more question, and I know like I briefly touched about it before. But I guess like what is your guys's ideal length if you're going to go ahead and listen to a podcast?
I'll say like 30 minutes.
I prefer anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour. Depends on how dense the topic is.
I think it depends on what kind of things I'm trying to solve. So like, I know that Generation Z and even my generation is pretty like quick. So whenever it comes to solving a specific problem, if it's as simple as how do you write a good intro paragraph or like something like that, I want it as quickly as possible. Give me it pretty concisely. If it's an interview, I want to feel like I'm really getting to know somebody. So I would prefer it to be between like 30 minutes to an hour and a half. And then with interviews, I like interviews that go deeper than most other interviews. Like a lot of interviews touch the surface and it's like kind of boring. Like I could have found that in their About Me page. I really, really want to get to the heart of things. So I like interviewers that keep on digging.
For me, hour and 15 minutes to hour and a half. And I think just to answer a question that I think you asked me a little bit earlier, like I don't listen for an hour and a half, but I like keep it paused on my phone. And so like if I'm driving 20 minutes, I listen. Then an hour later, I'm driving back 20 minutes, I listen. So like I listen to it throughout the day. And I'd say like everything that Ella said, I really like if sometimes it'll be like a topic that I search and I start listening to a new podcast that I've never listened to before. If they just have like quick sort of like a weird, like almost lightning round the whole time for like half an hour, I never listen to them again because it's just like a weird thing where they just like let the guest answer like one or two sentences and I'm just like, I don't care. Like this is like, doesn't work. Whereas if they really dig deep, and I found that Armchair Expert I listen to all the time and they really do a good job of that. Dig deep and yeah, like what Ella said.
One thing that I will add, so I am starting one of my own podcasts eventually, but one person that does a fantastic job with interviewing is Design Matters podcast. Y'all should look into her. She just does the most fantastic job researching her people so that whenever they get on, she talks to them and asks them questions in a really, really cool story format. And it's just like, wow, dang, she knows a lot. She knows how to lead.
Thanks for the suggestion. I just wrote it down. Okay, and then I think that's probably all we wanted to get for like the like kind of information and what people are looking for. What was the other question, Silas?
I think the other biggest thing on my mind is really like, I'm not sure how many people here have their own podcasts besides Jamie? Does anybody else run a podcast now?
I've produced several in the past, but I don't do it on a regular basis.
I guess I'm just curious to look at if there's any, again, if there's not a lot of like depth of wanting to like share here, we can move on. I don't want to take up all the space here, but curious to understand like for getting sponsors and monetizing the podcast, turning it into like a revenue stream. What are some of the things that you guys have seen with either the shows you listen to that they do, or possibly like if you have any experience getting sponsors, how do you go about that? Like, do you identify type sponsors? Do you just kind of go out to everybody? Like, what are your thoughts there?
My first thought is that unless there's someone here who has already achieved that this might not be the best group to help you with those specific problems. And I would tap your network and seek out people who have done exactly what you're trying to do and offer them some kind of value in exchange for their time, and just ask those questions to people who've done it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's a fair point. Yeah, I think we can wrap it up there on that. Katja, I think we can brainstorm the rest of this, but this is super helpful, especially the insights on you guys' like podcast habits. It's super helpful.
Yeah, this was extremely helpful. Thanks so much for letting me dig into your brains a little bit.
Awesome. All right. Cool. So who would like to take the next hot seat?
I can.
Amazing. Go for it, Ella.
Okay, so this is also podcast related, but it's a little bit different. So I want to create a podcast about humanity. I'm kind of stuck whenever it comes to my value proposition, because I had come up with this format that I liked for the most part. It was going to be philosophy and then a story about a person who is either a person from history or whatever that just really embodied the human spirit, and then philosophy, then person, and then so it'd be like a rotating thing. But my kind of theme or thesis is kind of like, I think that there's something lost. Like, I don't know what it is, but I think there's something lost where, like, within humanity, I don't know if it's objective fulfillment or subjective fulfillment, or like, I don't know what it is, but I've been going back and forth with myself about whether or not philosophy is the right way that I should approach it. And yeah, and then after that, I guess, after I really clarify my value proposition, then I can decide how I want to structure the whole podcast. But I haven't really clarified how I'm going to go about studying or like searching for this answer.
If you were to try and condense that into a specific question for the group, what would it be?
Well, I don't think that this is very condensed. So first it would be, what have we lost? And second, it would be, what makes a human feel alive, I guess.
Interesting.
All right. Very interesting.
On the latter question, so you're just to make sure I understand, like, you're asking what makes a human feel alive. Are you asking this to identify how you're going to structure the podcast, or how you're going to get guests on?
I'm asking this because this is what I want to study in general. Like, this is what I want the podcast to be about. I just don't know how to approach that question. I thought about going about it from a philosophical standpoint, but I don't think it's just philosophy. So I don't know exactly what types of information I need to delve into. I want it to be kind of like a me researching and imparting kind of a situation. More in a story format, I guess. I don't know.
Why do you want to do a podcast instead of writing or something?
I think that it will, well, because I want to connect with a lot of people, and I want to add in interviews eventually. I also think that podcasting is a really, really great way for people to listen en masse. Like, I listen to podcasts much, much more often than I'll read a blog post. And so I think that if this has any, if it has value, which I hope it will, it's a good way to, I guess, maximize how many people would listen.
Could you clarify what you mean by lost?
I guess, I don't know entirely. I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. I think that there's something lacking on a deeper level, maybe. I'm not sure. And maybe I just want to explore the question.
Do you mean like lost as in like people 500 years ago had more fulfillment than we have now, or like lost from childhood?
I don't know. I don't think it's that 500 years ago people had more fulfillment than they do now. I just think that there's a capacity inside of the human being that's not being, I don't know, fully expressed or used or utilized, or I don't know.
I want to comment on something that I think would be interesting for you to consider, and it's not necessarily a question, it's a comment, but when it comes to these types of topics, I guess maybe there is one question here: is, are you somebody that you feel is highly qualified to be talking about this kind of philosophical question in the first place, just out of curiosity?
No, but I think that it's kind of like a learning out loud situation.
Nope,
like,
I totally agree.
I want to learn a lot.
Yep, that's like the whole method I have with my podcast too. But what I would suggest is, and this is actually came from a podcaster who now, like, he started a consultancy while doing a podcast, and then his long-term goal was to turn it into a podcast in the energy space. And he told me something profound the other day. He said, I had no credibility, and now after 5 years, I've interviewed people with credibility that have by nature given me credibility. Because if you're talking to that many people, you eventually become somewhat of an expert, right? Like, you look at Joe Rogan, he knows a lot of things about a lot of things because he talks to so many people all the time, right? So his is obviously more general, but people who talk about one topic a lot, you're going to start to like really do this learning out loud thing. You get to enjoy it, probably make some money while you do it, but you have this podcast, which is basically the key to talking to important people who might be really qualified to discuss these topics. So I would start with the interviews.
I got to agree with Silas on that. I'd start with interviews, because if you're interviewing to start with, you are going to find your answer more or less to what makes you feel alive and kind of what's lacking. It's going to give you more content to start doing your shows alone.
I would say also it seems like interviewing would be a great way to start. And I have interviewed some people on my YouTube channel, and I just like approached friends who had like interesting hobbies. I approached an old teacher and interviewed him. So you could do something like that.
Getting this vision of like the podcast is something like what's missing, a series of conversations exploring of what's missing in the human experience.
By the way, that's an extremely interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually thank you, Silas. I love the idea of like starting with interviews. I think it's a cool idea because it'll give me threads to pull on. Like right now I'm kind of struggling as to decide where to begin. But if I start talking to a lot of people who are probably much, much more well-versed in the different topics, then I'll know where to begin.
So this is exactly what I did with my climate tech podcast. Like, I was super fascinated by it, but I'm not an engineer by any means. So I was like, how am I supposed to figure out which problems to solve in the future? And that's exactly why I interviewed people doing this stuff in the space, because after less than a year, I've already gotten pretty good knowledge, and like I've been able to start drawing themes out. And you're for sure going to be able to do the same thing with what you're doing. And you do this for a year, 2 years, before you know, you can start doing solo episodes, right? And you can do things on your own where you're just discussing these topics. Maybe you're taking what you're learning and you're writing it down, like Gabe said, to do a second format, right? Getting more exposure out there, but also like formalizing the ideas in your mind. The reason I do podcasting is because people don't care if it's not quite perfect. Whereas writing, like, they're going to be maybe a little bit more like, this is really, really messy. You should have thought about this before you wrote it. So I think that, especially if you're really just going down these questions, like, to me, that would be fascinating. I first of all would listen to this, by the way. This seems extremely intriguing to dig into. So I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
I have a thought also about like finding your sort of like one sentence pitch, which I think is like one of the things you were talking about. For me, my like one sentence pitch for my YouTube channel is your guide to making everyday things more fantastical. And I think that the way I came about that was like I always sort of like was drawn to that without having those words. And it took me like a year of making videos or like 15 months of making videos before I came about like, oh, this is what I want to do. Like, this is what all these different like things that I wanted to pull together kind of all led to, if that makes sense.
That does. Silas, I have a question for you. So you have this podcast on the climate, and in the beginning you said you didn't know as much about it. How did you structure your interviews differently since you're approaching a theme and like this big industry instead of these individual people and what they think, kind of, if that makes sense?
So I did both. I first always gave them an opportunity to plug their technologies, right? So I started with some of my first people were just people I bumped into because I had to get somewhere, right? I would just ask them like, okay, so tell me about yourself and your story and your journey into getting into climate tech. Because obviously we talked about this earlier with Sophy's, is people resonate with stories, right? They're going to remember the story of the podcast if it's that person, because if it's just like talking about topic, they might not remember it as much. So I start with the story, how they got into the space. And I think you could probably do the same for these thinkers, right? How do they like stumble into this? Like what motivated them? And then I would go from there into talking about their technology, right? I would ask them, okay, so what is your technology? Like, what are you doing specifically? Again, I don't know how applicable this would be for you. And then from there, I would transition into, okay, great. Now, could you talk and comment on the broader market, right? Like, what do you think about electric vehicles and like the supply chain issues, right? So I would just go into like, I would just ask them because they are thought leaders. I would just ask them their thoughts on the broader market. So I'd give them an opportunity to do all three: the personal story, what they're doing, which plugs their own work so that they like, get some publicity for their stuff, and then ask them their questions about like, what do they predict in the future? Like all these things, right? And I'm taking notes of this stuff, using it for my like future investment ideas and drawing out threads.
Okay, so that's interesting. So I'm thinking right now about like how I would construct a podcast whenever I'm approaching this interesting philosophical or just big question. And I would start it with a story, and then I'm just thinking out loud here, but maybe like asking them how they view like reality, or like what they understand as the world, maybe, or just like kind of understand their worldview first and then go into other things as well.
This is interesting. So I think there's another thing that along with this that you could do, and this is like, I also structured this. The way I structured my podcast was, I'm a newbie. Like, I knew a little bit because I did recruiting in the space, but I told my guests when I reached out to them, listen, I'm trying to bring the news of climate technologies to more people, such as myself, who grew up not knowing of it, right? Not knowing of the benefits. You could structure it in a similar way potentially, where it's like, hey, listen, I think that there's not enough deep thinking going on among the younger generation. I would love to ask you about these things, and start from a kind of like baby steps all the way up to maybe some bigger topics, right? So you get a wide range where newbies can listen and they're going to be fascinated by new theories and like thinking principles, and then you can maybe go into bigger stuff because it'll resonate with several audiences, is what I'm saying. So again, I hope that answers your question. Like, generally structuring in a way that's, hey, listen, I'm trying to help educate the next generation or whatever on these topics that I don't think are thought about enough, or something like that.
I think that could kind of, I think that could kind of go along with, or like, this is what Silas is already saying, like using your perspective as you're like, I'm guessing like 18, around that age, and like feeding into, like, instead of just being like, oh, I'm 18, I don't know anything about this, like I can't be someone of, like, I don't have a valuable perspective. Instead saying, oh, I can be the in-between between like people who don't know anything and the person who knows lots about a specific climate technology, but doesn't have the perspective of an 18-year-old who like wants to learn more about it, kind of thing. Of like, you can be the in-between that feeds the knowledge from the climate people to or like the
Like the filter.
whatever. Yeah, the filter between the more knowledgeable to your specific demographic.
I think that makes sense. Like being the middle point, right? Because there's the experts, there's the complete noobs, and there's you in the middle, forcing yourself into learning more, right? But once you get going on this journey, like you're going to be forced, trust me, it happened to me. You're going to be forced to constantly try your best to learn on your own too, right? You're going to be reading books, reading articles, listening to other podcasts, because you need to like stay aware of the new things, because they will give you the ability to ask the right questions.
I think something you could do is like try to think through, like maybe try to like get outside of yourself a little bit and think through like what is specific about my perspective of being an 18-year-old that maybe you wouldn't think of because it's just like automatic to you. Like I know for me, like I think, oh well, everyone's like in the same boat as me, but then like if I can do maybe like an exercise where you ask yourself like what, even if you've done like once you've done 3 interviews, maybe an exercise where you ask yourself like what are 10 things that I've learned from these 3 interviews that kind of like specifically I've like learned more about them and they're kind of like specific to your demographic of being like 18, like being in the US, that kind of thing.
I wonder, does it feel like we're moving closer in the direction of what you're initially seeking?
I think it is. I think that I need to clarify exactly what I want myself to be in this journey, because being a filter, like I don't have very much to say yet. And I definitely think that most of my favorite interviewers carry the conversation and carry the story so that the person who's being interviewed can fully shine. So I don't want to impose a ton of my own personal, like, this is what I think, and this is who I am too much. But I also think that I kind of just need to figure out how I'm going to make it about humanity. Like, it's not about this one person. It's about kind of the bigger picture. So I need to kind of connect things and make sure that I'm making the right, asking the right questions to get to the right end, I guess.
So a couple things are like, what might some of those questions be?
Well, starting with what makes people feel alive. I've started asking people that I know that question, and I usually get something along the lines of creating something or being with a certain type of a person, like being around family or something like that. So exploring that kind of question, questions about fulfillment, objective versus subjective. I mean, rules, like exploring questions about the rules that we impose on ourselves, and maybe natural law and just like truthing. So truth.
Can I interject a little bit? I think you've asked a lot of really important questions, and I think you have more clarity than you realize. The thing that I think that you need to do is you need to start, because as soon as you start, you will then start recognizing what you like more and what you don't like more, and it will come naturally. But all of this like thinking before doing is just getting you like in your head too much. Like you have obviously, like you've thought about a lot of these things. You probably thought about a lot of these things, maybe not more than Gabe. I don't know. Gabe's a pretty big, deep thinker. But you've thought about these things a lot. It's obvious to everybody on this call. You just need to go out there and do it. Just start talking to people and start recording those conversations and get it going, because that's the way you're going to clarify what you want to do. Just make yourself like a goal of 5 podcasts or something like that, 5 episodes. And then you can reassess, like listen back to those 5 episodes. What do I like? What do I not like? What do I want to do better? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would do.
It looks like you're trying to connect I think maybe one thing you're trying to do, and like correct me if I'm wrong, is connect the like what is the like what makes you feel alive with the individual. And so maybe like once what Silas is saying, like once you've done 5 episodes, you can kind of hone in on how to answer or how to ask the questions you're trying to ask, and how to get more and more specific of like what answers you want. And like by doing it, you'll be able to like learn as you go and like get more and more specific about like what kind of questions should I ask, can I do this better, and how can I build off the experience I already have.
Right. Yeah, like right now the sample size is 0, but once you have 5, then to both of their points, you'll kind of have a better sense of like, man, you know, I really felt my meaning radar going off mid conversation when I was asking these kinds of conversations, and the direction was going here. Let's start optimizing the rest of these shows to just stay inside of that area that is most meaningful and most playful and interesting to me. So yeah, I guess at this point, do you feel like you might have enough to work with, Ella, at least to get started?
I do, definitely. One final question. So I began, my goal is to start and put everything out on January 1st. That's whenever I'm starting. But I had begun with doing my second episode. I want to be Man's Search for Meaning, because I think that that's pretty in line with the whole thing. So I think instead of the philosophy, I'll do interviews. But should I still do books and or case studies on people that embodied the human spirit? Or should I focus entirely on one thing?
I think try out everything you might want to.
Yeah, try it. Just try everything. Just do it.
Yep.
Okay, then yes, I have everything.
Amazing. Great. Cool. So, who wants to step into the hot seat?
I want to give everybody else the opportunity to go, but I do have something if nobody else has something.
I have something. Sorry.
Yeah. No, they already went. It's all good. Go for it, Jamie.
Okay, so I don't know, this might seem random or weird, but okay, so I have a small like virtual assistant business right now, and it's cool to have your own business, but it's still, you know, you still have clients and stuff you have to do on a certain schedule. And so I was trying to think of things that's basically just me. And so I came across the idea of like building domain names, like so the one I was thinking I would be interested in building it's just Adrenaline Junkies, because I am an adrenaline junkie. And it would be like, you know, you just want to go, you want to do something crazy. Where are these things? Where do I find these things? And so just kind of, I guess, like a curated list of like all the different places all around the world. And so the idea for monetization, at least at some point, would be, you know, advertisements from the places that you're listing. And then I had got, prior to, you know, like pandemics and restrictions and all the things, like it might be cool to eventually build that into like a travel agency for adrenaline junkies. But that's like long-term, seeing how travel, like, I don't even want to think about that right now. But I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if it's a good idea, the whole curated list of like, these are all these different places where you can go do these crazy things where you might die, you know? And if it is a good idea, like, I'm not really sure, like, I guess how to start, if that makes sense. It's very vague. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't fully yet understand the question. And so the first step would be to just get clarity on like, what is the question? It sounds like you have a VA business today, and your question has something to do with how do I transition into something else?
I shouldn't have even talked about the VA business, because it's got nothing to do with it other than,
okay, cool.
I have some knowledge of kind of running my own small business. but I would like to get away from like that client intensive of a business. And so I was thinking, I you know, there's all these websites out there that are just basically domains that curate information, you know. So like if you want to know about activities in Paris, there might be a website that's all it is just activities in Paris, and that's it. So I was thinking of doing something along those lines for like activities for adrenaline junkies, like all around the world. If you want to go base jumping, here's the top 10 places to go base jumping. So I guess, but I'm not really sure about like, number one, building a website. Like I've built websites, I've built several websites, but they're very basic. And this feels like it should be a much more robust website. And I'm not really sure of the best resource for that, because I've only worked on WordPress like once and it was an awful experience, but maybe I need to learn how to do that again. I don't know. I guess that's just my question is like, just a first step, I guess. Like,
I guess I want to, there's a couple things I want to ask questions. I also want to maybe like, let's get kind of like drill down to maybe a specific topic, because there's a lot of things. By the way, I think this is quite a fascinating idea. Have you, so what first comment is a lot of interesting and quite successful businesses have started this way, as being essentially lists. Okay. Have you tested interest at all? And also along with that caveat, do you care about there being revenue right away?
I have not tested it other than like my own, you know, like, I mean, you hear about all these various different crazy things you can do and going online and just being like activities for adrenaline junkies, and there's nothing. So I am my only test. I have not tested it. And no, there does not need to be revenue right away. I mean, I do have other sources of revenue coming in. So I was thinking I need to like build up the website where it's getting some traffic before I can like hit up one of these companies that's listed on my page to be like, hey, I've got so many visitors a month. Would you like to advertise? I mean, I know that's not a good pitch, but you know what I'm saying?
I think that's actually great. So I guess I know this is kind of Nick goes against the questions right away, but I do have a suggestion in what I've heard a lot of people on, especially the Daily Hustle talks about this a lot. I dropped this in the chat. There's a company called levels.io that does kind of like this list business, right? They started out with just like lists and tracking information kind of, and then compiling it. And the guy makes quite a lot of money doing that. But what I would suggest for the very first thing is get your domain and set up a sign up sheet. Set up a like, whether it's just for the newsletter or whatever it is, just make it so that they have to take an action on it. Okay. Give it a nice piece of like basic copy saying like, hey, this is the place to come for all of your like, for all adrenaline junkies. Like what, I'm not a good copywriter, so you guys put that, but point is like put some nice piece of copy and try to get them to buy in. Okay. If you see this, like, again, there's going to be nothing on there. So it's going to be tough to really see if it does go viral, because people are like, okay, what am I like, how am I supposed to trust that it's going to happen? But that is like a tester of the market, right? You're going to start to test that the market is working. The other thing is I would just like start a Squarespace website, because it's super easy. That's what I work with. Again, I'm sure that other people have opinions on that. I would just start compiling a couple things, start getting some of these like things together, because if you're not in this for a very short-term reward, you can build this slowly. And once you like keep building it, you will have visitors, and you can then work off of referral codes, or you can do, advertisements, and you can do a newsletter too.
Yeah, I figured a newsletter would probably have to figure in there somewhere. Okay.
Two questions. One, is there an adrenaline junkie community? I'm thinking like podcasts, Instagram influencer, Facebook group.
I don't know if there's an Instagram influencer. I'm sure there probably is. And I'm pretty sure on Reddit and like I know there's all kinds of threads on just adrenaline junkie activities on Reddit. I just haven't really dove into it.
And then my other question is, are there other niches like adrenaline junkie that are kind of like a similar idea? Like I'm thinking like maybe things to do for people who have ADHD or something like that.
I mean, not that topic specifically necessarily, but yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of websites out there that are just like things. I mean, there's some that are just huge where they're like things to do in basically every town in America. I mean, you can go to this one website and it's like things to do in San Francisco, things to do in Los Angeles, things to do, you know, like, yeah, they've made it into a huge thing.
I have several thoughts on this. Number one, like on the idea of, oh, actually, let me back up. I was doing some searching and I don't see any kind of like major communities or, you know, like listicle sites or like, you know, exactly what you're describing specifically for adrenaline junkies, which I think is really cool. So it doesn't look like anyone is doing what you're trying to do already. So you have no competition, which is great. The second idea is that, you know, you don't have to be the one that does the website. Like you can partner with people in your network or outside of your network, whatever, that have the capacity to build a proof of concept for relatively cheap, just to spit test the idea to see if it has traction or merit. And Isaac Morehouse, I don't know exactly what resource or where. I know that he's talked a lot on podcasts about how to market test an idea without actually like fully taking it to market. And there's entire schools of thoughts and entire like systems and processes that exist out there. And Isaac Morehouse would be a good person to reach out to about this. And if you tell him that you're a Praxis participant, I'm sure he'd respond to your email.
Oh yeah.
He'd say like, how do I, if you send, actually, here's an idea. If you send Isaac Morehouse a 1 to 2 sentence email that says, hey, I'm a Praxis participant. I was told that you're a genius at market testing ideas without actually doing them. Here's what I'm thinking of, like 1 sentence thing. How would you test that without? And he will almost certainly, just like in sending him similar stuff like this, he'll reply with like 3 or 4 paragraphs. He'll be like, oh shit, yeah, here's what I would do. Like he's just that kind of guy. Yeah, so that would be my recommendation. And again, just to shift the thinking, like you don't have to be the technical one that does all the things. You just have to know someone who could be the technical one who does all the things to test something like this.
Okay, well, I guess I don't really know what you mean by like finding someone to test the idea for me. I don't know what that even looks like.
It looks like knowing someone who's great at building websites and sharing with them, hey, I have this really cool idea. Would you like to work with me on it? And they go, huh, that sounds really cool. I would rather be doing that than doing nothing. And then they help you build it and you guys have fun doing it together. It's called a partnership.
Okay. And so, I mean, are we just, they're literally just doing this for fun? Like I'm not paying them?
That is possible.
Okay. I mean, that would be preferable, obviously, but I don't expect anybody to work for free.
What I would say is like, think about the incentive structure for the person, right? But like you might consider reaching out to, I'm guessing that there's like a couple people who are probably like, not a couple, there's probably a good handful of people who are like good at building these kind of listicle type sites.
Mm-hmm.
Reach out to some of the listicle sites that you go to frequently, right? I know there's one timeout for me in New York that I check all the time for stuff to do New York, right? There's all kinds of them. And I would just like reach out to some of the people who either work there or whatnot, just like pick their brain a little bit. Some of them might not be interested in sharing, but probably most of them will be. And before you know, you might find somebody who just like, you feel like you vibe with, that you could say, hey, you know, actually I'm working on something right now. I'm just curious, like, would you want to work on this with me? And help direct it. But a lot of these people who are going to be like really good at the technical data entry stuff, they're not going to want to be running the face of it potentially. Like they're going to want to be interested in finding and collating that information making it look nice, etc. So you just got to find an alignment of values, right? You're obviously trying to do something because you're an adrenaline junkie. You might find somebody else who has the technical skills who's also that, right? It has to resonate with them. And yeah, whether you like, depending on how you want to structure it, if you want to make it a partnership and then split the revenue as it grows, fine. You could look at it from a perspective of find somebody who's really interesting, pay them a few $100s to do some like testing of this. Like maybe it's simply running test ads, right? They're going to run Google ads to go sign up for your newsletter site that says coming soon, right? You might not even have anything besides that, just running some testing to identify like, do people actually click on this if they see it?
Okay.
And that could be a few $100s, it could be a couple thousand, like to do some testing there. But that could be like a very good indicator to decide whether or not this is something you should put even more time into.
That's a good idea too. Okay, that's great. Like I have several first steps. So I have a direction to head in now. Thank you.
Excellent. And do you feel complete?
I do, actually. Thank you.
Roger that. It's awesome. So we could go to Silas, but I want to make sure, we have a couple other folks, Jonathan, Sergio, Gabe, Sarah, anyone else who would be interested in taking a hot seat.
I guess I would like to say something. I've been sitting here not really saying anything, just listening.
Perfect,
now,
man. How can we help?
I have this little thing where now in my garage, me and my dad made these presses to make tortillas. We made these presses out of wood, and I have like 12 of them in the garage. And last year, we sold like a bunch of them when the pandemic was really happening. Usually on like Facebook Marketplace, but my mom handled most of that. And now we're not really like selling any. We're not really working on it. Now I really just want to. I was thinking I could maybe set up a little website, put some pictures of them up there. Maybe get like an email list going, something like that. And I could ship them to people, stuff like that. And I was thinking I could put them on places like Etsy or Amazon, and maybe start selling other things like chairs, tables, rolling pins, stuff like that. I was just wondering, like, what do you guys think? What would be the best place to start selling? Like, on how? Like on Facebook Marketplace, Etsy, Amazon, my own website.
What jumps out as being very interesting is like you guys made tortilla presses.
Yeah, it's like it's just a tortilla press. Like
I understand.
You get a ball of dough and you put it in and you squeeze it and it flattens out and it's a tortilla and you cook it. And bada bing, bada boom.
My first thought is that like that's so niche and cool that why would you want to make like boring ass like rolling pins and stuff? I feel like you guys could be, the Zavala tortilla press company and like owning and dominating that niche. If that's where you guys started and that's kind of like a family thing between you and your dad, that sounds pretty special to me.
Yeah, so I was thinking we could make basically anything. But tortilla presses might be nice. I was also thinking maybe we could put like punch stuff on them. Like at the school I go to, July Central, in the engineering class, we have a CNC lathe machine. And I was thinking maybe I could bring in the top of the presses and I could laser in like people's names, people's signatures, maybe even pictures, and people could pay me like extra to punch stuff on there, like their face or something. Like a nice message for like a Christmas gift.
Would that imprint on the tortilla?
We could.
Yeah, it seems like you could probably do it underneath it, right? If you made it for an impress, like an impression.
Yeah, I think you could probably do something like that. I think it'd be a lot harder, and it would really have to be, but the tortilla would have to be a lot thicker, and it have to be something more like a gordita or sopa, so like the thing will actually come out. But I can see that working.
I have a couple questions. Like, first of all, by the way, this is fascinating. I think I might want to buy one at some point. Who were your main customers and how many did you sell? You said that you sold a bunch during the pandemic. Who were buying them?
Well, the main customers were really people in our area, like in our town, people that knew us personally. It was really through word of mouth. But the first couple we sold was just like family members, because at the start of the pandemic, there were a lot of like places that like would sold tortillas, like shops dedicated to it, and there's a bunch of like different like production plants that like made tortillas shut down, and a lot of people were kind of scared. They didn't really want to go to the store, and people wanted to like cook more at home. And we were the first couple people we gave tortilla presses to was like for a close family, for like $20 a piece. And then other people saw them like on Facebook, and they were like, "Ooh, we want a tortilla press. These look nice." And then eventually, my mom and my dad just started getting messages that other people in the town wanted tortilla presses, and eventually, what just ended up happening was people would just basically like show up at our house. They'd walk into the garage and they'd pick up tortilla press that they liked, and they'd walk out. And so we sold a lot of them, mostly just through people saw posts on Facebook, and they just contacted my mom through the Facebook Marketplace. They showed up on basically any day because it was a pandemic. I was home. We weren't really doing anything. I was just at home, and people just showed up almost any time of the day. And it was really just through word of mouth in the town. We shipped a couple, like 12, to like other states, but we sold like hundreds in the town of Joliet. And I have an idea of how many we sold because I got $2 off of each one that we sold, and I managed to get like together like $200-$300 over the course of last year, which is pretty nice.
So that's off the presses?
Yes.
That's really incredible. So what are you selling them for?
We were selling the presses for, at first it was $20, and then we raised it to like $25. And we have other presses that we were selling. Like there was like the standard one that was for like more regular tortilla. And then we sold like a bigger one, which was for something like a huracan, which is like a big quesadilla, which is like a bigger press. And we sold that one for $60. And we also sold like smaller ones that had like a cutout. So you could make, instead of just making a tortilla, you could make a gordita instead of having to press it out by hand, because gorditas are thicker than a tortilla. They're like 3 times thicker, and you'd cut them out and you'd add a filling inside, and they're a lot harder to make than a tortilla, because the tortilla is just a flat. It's just like it's flat. It's a circle. It's very simple. With the gordita, you have to get like the right thickness. It has to be consistent. It's a lot harder. And we sold tortilla presses. We sold different ones. The ones for gorditas and tortillas were like $25. That was the price we ended up settling on, and the larger ones for huracans were $50. And I got $2 off the tortilla ones.
What was did you guys have, like, were you selling them faster than you could make them? Like, what was the situation with that? I want to understand like the bottleneck.
At first, it really was. We were selling them faster than we could make them. We literally just couldn't find good wood to make the tortilla presses out of. That was really a struggle. We had to go out to different places and find wood that wasn't warped, what there was already, because with different kinds of wood, if the wood dries out or gets wet, it really warps, and because the tortilla presses have to be flat. And if you get like some cruddy wood, like spruce or something, and it gets wet after you like wash it, and the wood warps, it's basically ruined. Or you get something that's brittle, like some dry oak or something, and you try to put screws through it, and you don't have and it shatters when you try to put it, when you apply force. You have to find, my point is, any old schmucky wood won't work. Like, you can't do plywood. It has to be like basically like new boards of like nice oak that hasn't been like impregnated with like fire retardant or any other chemicals, because then there's gonna be all kinds of problems like food and whatnot, food safety. And it has to be like, we found like pine and oak was really nice, but getting like nice wood was expensive. it was really just a struggle to find wood. And we also need to find like hinges. We couldn't find the right size of hinges for doors. We were like, I remember at times we would go into
So
Menards.
Sergio, this is all important, but I'm not sure that it's relevant, because we can understand very clearly that the wood and the materials are very important to source. But I think, Silas, you might have had an additional question that had something to do with like you're having massive success is kind of like one point, which is incredible. And Silas, did you have a follow-up question to that?
Yeah, I mean, just the general like focus I want to keep on the questions here is like, so I can appreciate, it sounds like you're very focused on like the craftsmanship of these things, which is really like appreciable. I grew up working in a cabinetry shop, so I can like totally relate. But we're talking like, we want to focus on like the business side of things, which I think this is like super interesting, because you said you guys sold like over 100 and you weren't even like really trying to do this. To me, this is fascinating. And I just want to understand like the bottlenecks, right? So is there, and it sounds like you guys have, by the end of this time, like you sold a couple hundred of these, you had it pretty much down, like the product itself, yes or no?
Yes.
And were there any issues with getting people to buy, or did people like, was it mostly friends and family? Was there a bunch of people that were just like, didn't know you from Adam, or that heard about it, or somebody else cooked them and made their own press at like at a party or something, and they're like, where'd you get that? I want one. Do you know anything about that data on how they found out?
Basically, it was almost all through word of mouth. I don't think the number of people that came out, we didn't do like any outreach or any ads. It was all through word of mouth. People who went to other people's houses and saw the press and then wanted one. We did like no advertising whatsoever.
Wow, that's so powerful.
It's
you're
crazy
really onto
good.
something.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess there's a couple other substantial questions before we get into like actions, but the next thing was once you guys towards the end, like what happened that changed that you guys like stopped selling them? Did people keep asking you, just like, hey, we just don't have any more left? Like what changed that you didn't just like keep going on this? Because I want to know if there was like some kind of major shift.
At one point near I'd say like about 8 to 10 months ago, 6 months ago, we just like stopped making them because the demand kind of like dropped off significantly once things started to open up or during the summer and the spring several months ago, and we just stopped making them. Instead, we started doing other things, because in the garage we do like all kinds of stuff. We make cabinets and whatnot, and we weren't really working that hard at it. And once we got like 15 in stock or 12, and we weren't like running low on them, and people still come in and they buy them every once in a while, but it's like 2 a month when people come in, and we just stopped. We basically just stopped making them once people stopped showing up.
I wonder if it's possible that you just like saturated your town.
Yeah,
basically, I think
there's that, and I think there's the issue that to me it seems like this is a product that people don't even know that they want until they see it. Because like I never thought about having one until now, and I kind of want one. So there's a couple things. Well, what I wanted to clarify, do you like, is just generally what you guys do when you and your dad, like, are you guys just doing like making wood made products? Like, you're making products out of your garage and selling them? Like, are you doing like contract jobs? Like, I want to understand maybe more broadly, and then like, because I want to make sure the incentives are aligned here.
Well, my dad's a carpenter by trade, and all this like tortilla press and all this it's really just like a hobby, like on the side stuff. We make different things like rolling pins or tortilla presses and cabinets. It's really not. It's really just like a side. Basically, it's like a side thing.
Got it. What I guess I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna let Nick maybe jump in with some questions, because I think we should, like, my idea is to go into the commerce side of things.
Yeah. So what's coming up for me is like, you had this rapid success, and you saw that within a town getting exposure to what it is that you guys do, you and your dad, it like exploded with demand, and you sold hundreds of units. And I just want to emphasize that that's very rare. That doesn't happen. So the fact that that happened signals to me that you're onto something with this product idea that is really, really cool and really, really exciting. And one possible way to scale such a thing is to expand your market beyond your town. One possible way to do that would be to throw up an e-commerce store and track inventory and figure out ways to sell them. And I sincerely suspect that there is a market of like more affluent, just like middle class people on Facebook, for example, who don't have any past anchoring to this idea that these are only $20, and you could probably sell them for like $50 a piece. And you then at that price point would have 60 to 80. Yeah. You would then have budget for Facebook advertising. You would have the opportunity to increase your margin from 10% to 100% per unit. And you could probably take it really, really, really fucking far. Zavalapress.com. Get your tortilla, carno, whatever, or blah, 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 all the different foods, all the different types of presses. And that's all within the realm of possibility. So my contribution is I wanted to paint that picture that all of that is highly likely to be possible.
I have a question. How would I buy one?
Oh, I could just, to be frank, you could just PayPal me some money and I would just ship you one.
Okay.
At least that's how it would work right now.
The broader question is, how do you scale this though, right? Like, look at what you have. So I had something that was like, I guess it's somewhat similar. It's like a small scale store. Like I sold che mate, like I sold tea setups, right? And so we bought stuff and put it together and sold it as a package, right? And I just set up a Squarespace store, or an e-commerce store on Squarespace. Super easy to do. And I don't know, we sold maybe 40 units, possibly over the course of like 6-7 months. If you guys are doing this, like I think that my gut feeling is that the hardest thing would be figuring out how to find your market. My guess is that, again, aside from the town you're in and word of mouth, you'd probably be best doing something that involved like a video or imagery of this thing, because I'm assuming that when people saw this thing, they were like, holy crap, I want one, right? So like my gut feeling is like, if I saw something like this on Instagram, I'd be like, wow, that's really intriguing. I might not buy it right away, but I might send it to somebody who like loves to cook and loves tortillas, right? And they might buy it, right? So I would probably, if it was me, I would start with a website, get it up and running so you can get orders through there, make it look super, super official, even if it's just out of your garage, and just use that as your platform for selling. If you want to use Facebook Marketplace because that worked, it's not a bad idea either. But I think that making it like taking it to the next level and making it like an official store, that gives you the front that you need to then kind of toy around with the marketing side of things and like figuring out, okay, who would we like, what would the keywords that we'd run against, like what ads should we run on what platforms, etc. That's what I would consider if I was in your shoes.
I have a question, like, do you have any, because I already have like a domain set up through Bluehost, sergiozavala.com, but I'm doing basically nothing with it right now. Do you have any recommendations for like tutorials to like set up like payment and like an actual website to sell these things?
So 2 things. First of all, I would probably, and guys, everybody else jump in if they feel right, I would not use your personal name, your personal brand on this one. I would maybe like Nick said, like Zavala Press or something like that, like something that is specifically tied to what this product is. Because if it's just your name, that kind of can limit certain things in the future. That's just a branding thing. But you know, in terms of a tutorial, it's extremely easy. If you like, I'm sure other people have built commerce sites. When I use Squarespace, they have videos for literally everything on how to create it. And it is extremely intuitive and very, very easy to set up. I don't have a specific tutorial, but I'm sure I could find you one and send to you. Like there's so many out there.
All right.
Yeah, there's tons of information that you can find online about how to launch like the bare bones e-commerce store business, et cetera, et cetera. There's tons and tons of podcasts, tons and tons of everything. Really, like my next thought would be to talk to your dad and ask him like, hey, we had a lot of success around this. Is this something that you would be interested in exploring? And it's quite possible that he would be. And then if both of you are interested in exploring it, then you can make the decision to explore it. And you guys will find the podcasts and the books and the resources, et cetera, that you're seeking. And at that point, it's not hard. Like you can throw up a site literally over the course of a weekend that is professional enough and presentable enough to do this. If you wanted to, you could invest the proceeds $200-300 and pay some local video editor, to come to your place and do some stock filming and stock photography, et cetera, and like take care of all the needs that you would need to.
I was about to say, you could pretty easily take I could tell you what kind of footage to take, and I could edit a video together for free.
Well, there you go.
All right.
Dude, let's go. Yes, Sophie. So yeah, those are conversations worth having. Also, I like the name Zavala Press. That's just me.
Zavala Press.
It does sound pretty legit, if I'm being honest.
Sounds very legit. What are your takeaways from this conversation, Sergio?
I need to set up a website. I need to set up a website where I can sell these things. Yeah, it's a big first thing I need to do. Set up a website with a domain name. Right now I'm looking to see if Zavala Press is available. Yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Also, I mean, that's a big thing. I can't really think of anything else that comes to mind.
I'd really re-emphasize what Nick said. If you make this verbal you have this discussion with your dad, and you guys like agree to pursue this, that creates a mindset shift inside that your subconscious will be like, okay, I got the mission. Now I'm going to go find the information to succeed at what I want to do, because your subconscious will always seek an objective. But if you don't decide this is what I want, you're not going to be paying attention, because like the thing is, all of our brains are doing is like filtering things out, right? When we decide we want something, it lets those things into our daily life, right? Where we're scrolling on the internet and we see this thing, like you'd be like, oh shoot, that's really cool. I'll save that. I'll use that for my thing. So like that mindset shift is huge. What Nick said, I want to like re-emphasize that.
I think you could talk to the people in your town, especially, I think you said you had sold to restaurants. I would talk to the restaurants you've sold to and ask what they liked most about the press.
You've sold to restaurants? Did I miss that entirely?
Well, I'm almost certain I didn't say I sold to restaurants. We did sell to. Okay, yeah. But I mean, it is true. We did sell to like two different places two different taco places that sold doing tacos. We did actually do that, but I don't think I ever mentioned it. But it was like,
it's a big deal.
Yeah, but yeah, I should probably reach out.
But people who you sold to someone who made the tortillas and then sold the tortillas to someone else, right? The taco truck?
I don't know what they did with it. All I know is they bought 3. They sold something, maybe tacos. I'm pretty sure they sold tacos, if I'm remembering right.
Dude, you can also sell them to taco trucks and yeah. Go ahead, Sophie. Sorry.
That adds a huge amount of legitimacy to your ability to make presses. If you and then I would talk to them.
You're right, because logos. I feel like official press of the taco food truck plus this restaurant like et cetera, and you just have this like banner on the website that's like just cycling through different like B2B logos that you serve. Yeah, dude, that's what I was saying. As soon as you started speaking, I'm like, I envision this potentially, if you guys decide to make it so, this could be like a really fucking cool brand that's an extreme like niche owner
Yeah, like nice rustic tortilla presses.
I'll invest 1 Ethereum.
1 Ethereum.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
You need startup capital.
All right, this is now
Okay.
not the entrepreneurship mastermind. Now this is the fundraising mastermind.
The VC, yeah, some ridiculous thing. Oh man. That's
I think honestly, Sergio, this is amazing. I would take like write down your action items and come back to us in a month or whenever we do this again with what you've done.
Okay. All right.
cool, man. Do you feel adequately served?
Yes, I do. Very much so. I feel invigorated to take action.
Beautiful. Well, that's how I know this call was a success then. So thank you very much for taking a hot seat. Cool. So I'm actually going to stop the recording there because this is super fun and I love to end on a high note and we can all just hang out.